Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week, Arsenal continued marching toward the end of the season with a home match against Wolves. The yellow jerseys confused me. It was Crystal Palace. And Liverpool also clinched the league title against Spurs. So half applause there on that one. How you doing, Keith?
Just a friendly reminder that Tottenham get battered everywhere they go. That was it. The season's over. The Premier League season's set. It not officially, but yeah. Anyway, let's be gentlemen about this. Hat tip to Liverpool for finishing off the title in style. Amusing as it is, though, it came against Spurs. Just, obviously to get the win at home in front of their fans, which they hadn't done a couple of years ago, obviously because of COVID. So congratulations to Liverpool. And we've talked about this, how they're this all season long, right? How lucky we think they are and all of that. I mean, at a certain point, well, first off, the response to that is always, I'd rather be lucky than good. But, at the end of the day, they got the results they got. And it's a great performance from them all season around. Great performance from Salah, of course. Got another goal, which I believe they said he passed Sergio Aguero as the leading foreign goal scorer in Premier League history. So a tip of the cap to Liverpool. We'll see how many more points they rack up towards the end of the season as the celebrations begin. We'll talk about this a little later. We do play them before the end of the year, so I don't know what that's going to mean necessarily. But along
the lines of bringing me up to speed with stuff, Sergio Aguero, what team did he play for?
Aguero spent I don't want to say it was his entire Premier League career, but definitely the bulk of it with Manchester City. His single most famous moment would have been scoring the winning goal in the 2012 Premier League season. That was City's first title in their current, well, not really their current iteration. This was pre-Pep Guardiola. This was since being taken over by the Emiratis. This was their first title, and they did it. They needed a win on the final day of the season, which they got at home against Queen's Park Rangers, who was not particularly good. They trailed most of the game, and Aguero scored, I don't know, in like the 7th minute of stoppage time. I mean, at the death to win. It quite literally the last kick of the season. It was Manchester United was their was the other team, was the team they were competing against, and United's game had ended, and they were on the field. I think they were at Old Trafford. They were on the field. No, they were probably away. But anyway, they were on the field sort of, finishing the season, hugs, high fives. They thought, because they had seen the score of the other game up to that point, they thought they probably had won the title. And then all of a sudden the reports start coming in and they get it. No, actually City scored and they won. It's just, almost certainly one of the more dramatic swings you're going to get on the final day of the regular season, of the season in the Premier League. So that was Sergio Aguero who got that goal, which is lives long in Premier League memory.
All right. So aside from Liverpool winning the league, what else is going on around English football?
The other thing this weekend, we'll talk a little bit about this. That we played Crystal Palace on Wednesday. Of course, we're used to midweek games. Palace had to have the game moved though, because this weekend they played in the semifinals of the FA Cup, which they then turned around and won. So they beat Aston Villa. That was on Saturday. The other semifinal was earlier today being Sunday, as usual. Manchester City beat Nottingham Forest. And so in a couple weeks, it will be Crystal Palace and Manchester City for the FA Cup. That'll be in Wembley. Oddly enough, that'll be the weekend before the Premier League season ends. It's kind of an interesting bit of the schedule there. Usually, I feel like that usually comes after the end of the Premier League season, but I feel like it does. It usually does. But in this case, it will come the weekend before, which I assume means Palace and City will have another midweek game, probably before the final game on the final Sunday, which will be Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S. But yeah, congrats to Palace for getting that done. They'll face City. Palace has never won a major trophy. This is their third trip to the FA Cup final, and it's the first time they're not playing Manchester United. So that might be, maybe that'll be a bit of a different result for AFC Richmond. I mean, Crystal Palace.
Yeah. little confusing sometimes watching them play in Richmond Stadium.
Well, we could, of course. Palace is very clearly the model for AFC Richmond, for those of you who are Ted Lasso fans, which you probably are, because that's how this all started for us.
Right. We have them to thank. So I'm seeing something here. There's a Women's Champions League also?
There is a Women's Champions League, which we should point out Arsenal is the only English team to win it. But more importantly, they have a shot to do it again, because the Arsenal women beat Olympique Lyonnais earlier today as well. Smashed the French side, 8-time European champions, Olympique Lyonnais, the most successful team in the history of the competition, knocked out the semifinals by our Gunners. They will now head on to the Champions League final, where they will face Barcelona, who's probably going to win. Let's not sugarcoat this. Barcelona is extremely good on the women's side.
Okay.
They in their semifinal ripped apart Chelsea, who is probably going to win the English, the WSL, the Women's Super League, the English domestic league. And they got hammered by Barcelona already. So, probably not going to go so well. But consider this. The Arsenal women knocked out Real Madrid in the quarterfinals, topped a French team in the semifinals, and are all set to face Barcelona in the final of the Women's Champions League. I would just throw out there that Arsenal men have knocked out Real Madrid. They're about to face a French team in the semifinals. And oh, by the way, there's a pretty decent chance the other team waiting for them in the final will be Barcelona.
Yeah, funny how things work out.
I don't know what it means. That could just be a massive coincidence. But yeah, could just be a massive coincidence.
Yeah. Are there any, as it gets closer to the season, we usually start hearing rumblings about what transfers might be happening over the summer. Any news on that front?
Yeah, I mean, the thing, well, first I'll start with the usual disclaimer, and probably if this is not your first season here, and I know it isn't for you, if it's not your first season here, you'll remember me talking about transfer rumors are bonkers, and you can't believe most of them. You just sort of have to find the sources that you rely on and you trust to generally give you good information, and generally remember that the transfer isn't really final and happening until you see the player holding your club's jersey with the manager. Not like he bought one and is sitting there in his house in a new shirt. I mean, like, he's sitting there signing the contract with Arteta, mugging over his shoulder. When that's happening, then it's real. Until then, I don't know. But please try to avoid tracking airline flights and things like private jet flight trails and things like that. Nobody needs that. But anyway, that out of the way.
Yeah.
A few stories are floating around. Big one. This came up a little bit during the broadcast of the Palace game, but apparently Arsenal is in conversations with Thomas Partey about an extension. We know Partey and Jorginho are out of contract at the end of the season. I guess given they're not hearing similar rumors about Jorginho, I expect that means he's probably not long for Arsenal, probably back to Italy. Interesting, they are talking to Partey. We sort of talked about this a little bit too. Obviously, our sense is that Thomas Partey is definitely not the player now that he was when they signed him, which is not a surprise. He's a little bit older and he's kind of getting to that point. But I think he's adapted his game well and has been a useful player for us this season. And so as a result, I could see there being a desire from Arsenal's perspective to re-up and perhaps keep him around, presumably not as a regular starter for reasons we'll talk a little more about in just a second. But the one thing I think that definitely would need to happen from an Arsenal perspective is a reduction in Partey's wages if he's not going to play as much, because he is a large contract, and if he's not going to play as much, again, that's my presumption about what'll happen. But if he's not going to play as much, you need to free up some space in your budget, not in the sense of the league's bookkeeping, but just in terms of how much money Arsenal is actually putting out in terms of salaries each week. And they probably want to see that number come down if Partey is not going to be, a game and a half every week kind of player, or 2 games or a game and a half every week kind of player, which I don't think they want him to be at this stage for all kinds of reasons. So just something interesting there. We'll see what comes of it. Who knows? There was some interest from Saudi Arabia previously. I imagine that will still remain. There may well be some interest from other places. He was Atletico Madrid, and so he's played in Spain. Not sure, but the fact they're talking to him about extension probably means they wouldn't mind keeping him around, depending on how that plays out.
Yeah,
but that's current players on the roster. There are some. I guess we're going to talk about as well. The names floating around for coming in, right?
Sure.
So the big one is Martin Zubimendi. It was Martin Zubimendi.
I think so too. Yeah.
I know. I realized that. Martin Zubimendi.
Martin, right?
I kept writing down. Yeah. I kept writing down Zubimendi, and I forgot his first name. But Martin Zubimendi, currently at Real Sociedad. That story came out back in January, right? That he was a likely summer ad. The only thing I'll have to add here, for listeners who aren't also listening to the delightful Handbrake Off podcast, run by The Athletic, James McNicholas, Gunner Blog, as he's known, was able to report his sense that Zubimendi to Arsenal is not a done deal, but is definitely in very good shape. And there were some rumors about Real Madrid being interested, and I don't know if that's Real Madrid's really interested or Real Madrid is just, well, he's a good Spanish player. So, of course, Real Madrid is, made some phone calls, asked some questions. But from the sound of it, and as he described it, talking to people in Madrid, other journalists and people around, who would know things in this kind of space, it sounds like Madrid expects him to go to Arsenal. And so it seems like we're in good shape for that move. And he's a defensive midfielder. He, would really solidify that position and would allow us to turn Partey into a supporting player, a bench player, a squad player, as opposed to having to be thinking of him as our best 11.
Right.
The other name you're hearing thrown out a lot is, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Dean Huijsen?
Your guess is as good as mine there.
Who plays at Bournemouth. He was born in the Netherlands, but he's actually a Spanish international. Has just 2 caps with Spain, the senior team, and a couple of youth caps as well for the Spanish. But he plays at Bournemouth. He's a 20-year-old center back, very highly regarded, and I know there have been several big name teams have been kind of sniffing around about him. Presumably Arsenal is apparently one of them. And you may say to yourself, we don't really need a central defender, do we? And, Jakub Kiwior's had a really good week, but he's probably not our regular starter. I don't know. Does he decide he'd rather there's been interest in the past from Italian clubs about him going back to Italy. Is there enough interest for him to say, I'd rather be starting every week? And as we'll start to see, some of those decisions may come down a little bit to how the rest of the season plays out. If Arsenal were to walk away with a trophy, and I think which one it's the only one we can win. So if they were to walk away with a particularly large trophy, there are some players who might be willing to say, I capped out here. I won something big. As opposed to if they come away not winning something, perhaps there's a sense of unfinished business that I want to stay here and finish what I started. Or in the case of maybe Partey's looking at less games, Kiwior is looking at fewer games. Maybe he comes in and says, no, I'd rather go somewhere I can play every week. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next, really, especially once we get into the summer, to say nothing of obviously Arsenal's pursuit of offensive firepower and a striker and probably a backup keeper too. Just, because why not sign another one?
Well, so what is the deal with Neto? Like, is he not expected to stick around?
No, he was acquired on loan.
Oh, okay, I forgot.
He's going to head back.
Yeah.
There's a reason he's played. 1 game this year, 2 games this year, 1.
I don't think it's more than 1. I can't even remember offhand which the 1 would be.
I remember it being late in the Champions League because there was that one where he briefly decided, sure, I can save a shot from outside the box, and then kind of pulled his hands back, and then, there was that. I don't know that I don't remember if he's played any more
Yeah.
than that because he was cup tied in. Ideally, he'd have played in the Carabao Cup, but he was cup
Right.
tied in that one, so
Right.
he couldn't. And I believe, was he from Bournemouth? Whoever he was,
He might have been. Yeah.
yeah. Whoever he was for, it was. We played them in a stretch where the one stretch of the season where it's like, yeah, Raya should really have a day off, but we couldn't rest him
Right.
because he needed. It was his loan. The team he was loaned from, which I want to say was Bournemouth, but I'm going to get that wrong, and I feel bad about that.
I'm trying to remember because that might have also been where Raya came from. I'm trying to remember where Raya was before we got him.
Raya was Brentford.
Brentford is another one of the Bs. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the one who keeps confusing those two. But anyway, yeah. So, I mean, we do have Carl Hain. We do have Tommy Setford, the youth player.
That didn't go well the last time we had to put him in. I remember that.
I mean, he's also like 19. So
yeah, no, sure. I'm sure he'll get better, but for right now.
There was a name in Spain. Was it Joao Pedro, I think was his name? I want to say he's the keeper at Espanyol, the second club in Barcelona that supposedly our keeper coach Iñaki Caña was interested in. I don't know. It's going to be a lot of money. That'd be a lot of money for a backup keeper.
Right.
Unless they think actually he's already better than Raya and it becomes a Raya Ramsdale situation again. And I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much on that. But
it seems like that was pretty uncommon when that happened the last time with Raya and Ramsdale. It seemed like that was not would see.
No, but also like we've sort of seen, like there is definitely a step up in quality from Ramsdale to Raya.
Oh yeah,
and so I think in that sense,
but I think
the odd part about it really was how well we had done with Ramsdale previously, but how much of that is Aaron Ramsdale and how much of that was just we were an overall strong defensive side.
Right. I think what was also weird to me about it was that we brought in a new keeper, but kept Ramsdale on. Like, I think ideally you would bring the new one in and sell off the old one. But because of the way that we got Raya on loan that first season and stuff, it seemed messier than I might have expected, maybe.
A little bit, but it's also one of those, like when you bring in outfield players, like think about when we brought in Marino in the midfield, and obviously ignoring his injury, you can start to rotate those guys around because you're playing X number of you play 3 midfielders every game, guys can come in off the bench, like there's things you can do with that. You get to play one keeper in the game, that's it. And if you sub him out, like you can't afford the backup to get hurt in a way.
Well,
that's a problem in the way that an outfield player getting hurt and needing to be subbed off isn't. You can change your formation, you can do different things, but you're not going to waste a bench spot on a third keeper. So so you want Arteta made that comment right about subbing the keeper during the game. I'm sure it's happened at some major level in the sport, but I couldn't possibly think of one.
Right.
It's not
aside from injury. Yeah.
Outside of injuries, of course, but it's not a thing that happens. So yeah, it was an odd circumstance. I think you're right. The ideal situation is you would move on from one, but the way transfers go, sometimes that can be a really dicey situation to find yourself in. And for every club involved in that, you and your club, but also the club you're buying the new keeper from, but also the club you're trying to sell your other keeper to.
Right.
Like there's a lot of moving parts to even more to that kind of a transfer. So yeah, I can see why that one's a little nervier than what otherwise would be.
And like we say about soccer a lot, it's all about triangles. So while we're speaking about messy situations, we haven't done this in a while. Let's head over to the Messi Room and let's check in on Inter Miami. Right.
Well, you say Inter Miami. I say the true sweethearts of the MLS. That's right. Your first place Vancouver Whitecaps, who are not only have the best record in MLS, which is a weird thing to say. Vancouver's been one of those clubs that has more or less just kind of existed right around in and out of the playoffs. Like they've never been a particularly top of the table team. They've had a few rough seasons, but never been like truly embarrassingly awful like Cincinnati was a few years ago or some of the, or how like San Jose has been in recent times. They've never been that bad, but they've never been really good. So here they are now, first place in the league. And a 2-0 lead after the first leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals, the North American Championship, against Messi's Miami.
Right.
Second leg is going to be this week. We're recording on Sunday, looking at the calendar. Wednesday of this week, April 30th, they're going to be in Miami to try and hold that lead, which will be tough, no question about it. On the other hand, this Vancouver team previously has gotten results away in Mexico, particularly at Monterrey, who's one of the more successful sides in the competition, and in the quarterfinals away to Pumas, one of the big teams out of Mexico City. So Vancouver is not going to be afraid to go into Miami. Let's just say that they've gone to Monterrey, they've gone to Mexico City. Miami is not. Yeah. Now again, Miami has Messi, but they've proven themselves. They have every right to call themselves the favorites walking into that game, and it'd be an astounding run. First, just from the quality of the opposition they've faced, and I haven't watched any of this, so I can't pretend to have any real insight to what they're doing. But all the reports I'm seeing is they absolutely earned. This wasn't a case of they squeezed out a result on an amazing defensive performance and stole a goal they didn't maybe deserve against the run of play. They played exceptionally well against away to both Mexican teams, as well as getting results at home against those teams, and deservedly beat Miami 2-0. And have are on top of the league in MLS for a club that otherwise just kind of existed.
Right.
It's kind of a fascinating thing to see their success. The winner of that game, by the way, will face off against another Mexican powerhouse, either Cruz Azul or Tigres.
Okay.
So,
for anyone who wants to watch the CONCACAF Nations League at home, or it's Champions. Wait, is it the Nations League? Did I get that right?
Champions
Cup, right?
CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to watch that, where is that being televised? That's not Apple TV Plus, right?
No, in the U.S., it is Fox Sports has that one.
Okay.
So either probably on was it FS1, so their cable sports overflow channel. Probably not network television. Certainly not for Vancouver. And definitely not for Mexican teams. But also as well, since if you're in the US, Spanish language, Univision or TUDN, TUDN has that competition.
Now, let me just check. I had caught the very end of the Miami match this evening. We're recording on Sunday, the 27th tonight, and Miami played Dallas FC. Or is it FC Dallas or Dallas FC?
FC Dallas.
Yeah, FC Dallas. So they played FC Dallas, and I tuned in toward the end, just before Dallas scored the winning goal. And I saw Messi wasn't on the field, and he wasn't even on the bench. Is he healthy? Like, he wasn't suited up. He was like we see when someone's injured and just like watching from the sidelines.
I mean, the reason he's there in that instance is because he just wasn't going to play.
Okay.
And they
not even on the bench?
Yeah, they knew going in he wasn't going to play. I mean, he's Messi. The rules are a little bit different for him, but he's also, what is he, 38? I mean... Something
around there, yeah.
Yeah, he's hold on, I'm looking it up right now. 37. He's 37.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, he's not going to play.
Yeah.
Miami is definitely prioritizing continental competition, the Champions Cup, which is fair. Good. Makes sense. Good for them. But they're prioritizing that competition, and so from their perspective, as long as he's rested and ready to go for that game, they don't care about the MLS contest. Because the truth is, they're going to be good enough to make the playoffs, regardless of losing to Dallas. I don't care. They're going to make the playoffs, and as long as Messi's healthy in November, they have a shot at MLS Cup. So in a sense, much like for Arsenal, this regular season game for Miami was kind of meaningless. It just feels weird because it's early in the season, and are those games really meaningless? Well, in this instance, yeah, relative to the Champions Cup, and Miami has a large enough roster that they had players they could put on the bench. And I mean, again, like we've seen with Arsenal the last couple of weeks, right? There's been some of those youth players, and you're thinking, wait, who is that guy? And the answer is, it doesn't matter because he's not going to play. But, if he's playing, we're so dead. That's what's going on there. With Messi, he's not going to play. There's no point. Just don't even bother. Don't pretend. Just let him kick up his feet and relax. And have him fresh and ready to go for when Vancouver comes to town later this week.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, let's head back to jolly old England and talk about Crystal Palace's trip to the Emirates and how that ended up going for each side. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to take more than a point away from that one again, somewhat frustratingly. It started off promising, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I didn't. Again, because this was a midweek game, so I couldn't watch it live. I had it on in work and caught bits and pieces of it throughout the course of the afternoon, and then watched it live later. So I watched it live knowing the result. I didn't. Yeah, sort of the bits I saw sort of the very end of the game, and then sort of reading some of the post-game commentary about the quality of our play. I actually didn't think we were that poor. I mean, we weren't great, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, we were. I mean, I thought this was a game that frustrated me because it's one that we did the thing that I've always said we should do, right? We need to score early to help break these teams down, open the game up a little bit, and that's in fact exactly what we did. It's Jakub Kiwior, because of course it was.
That's the way it's been going.
Yeah.
But no, it was nice. I mean, it was a good free kick. Odegaard took it from near the sideline, near the touchline, but around the 18-yard mark or so, maybe 20 yards, 23, like somewhere around there. So, a decent kick. Or, I mean, great kick, decent location for the kick. And yeah, Kiwior put his head to it. It was funny for me. We talk about different ways that I get spoiled in minor and major ways on watching these after they've ended. This time what happened was I went to watch it on NBC Sports, and as soon as I went to the Premier League section, or maybe even been before that, I saw Odegaard's face or something. I saw Arsenal and Crystal Palace, and I just clicked on it, forgetting that what they put up there in the big navigation at the top of the app on the Apple TV, that is the highlights. Yeah. And so it's like I turn it on and they show the kickoff, and then within like a few seconds I see Kiwior scoring, and I flash to the time and I said, wait, 2 minutes? Oh, it hasn't been 2 minutes. I was like, dang it, nabbed it. But at least it was so early this time, it wasn't that major of a spoiler.
Yeah. And honestly though, I thought overall in the first half, I thought we were dangerous. I thought we followed that up with a lot of chances. And this is one that, I mean, again, it's so weird because this game was largely meaningless for both teams, right? Palace is not going to Europe, and they're not getting relegated. They're going to finish somewhere around 12th or 14th again. They're going to finish somewhere around there. The only thing they care about is the FA Cup, winning that first trophy in club history. We're going to finish in the top 5. Probably second, maybe third, but probably second. And what we care about is the Champions League. So this game, rescheduled for Palace's sake, right? I mean, how it's hard to get. It was hard for either of us to get worked up about it. And so we scored early. That was a good sign. And then we followed that up with a couple of opportunities that sort of just went begging. And it's like, if we could have been just a little, because at 1-0, of course, you never know. One bounce, all of a sudden it's a 1-goal game. Or excuse me, all of a sudden it's tied. 2-0 against the Palace team that doesn't really care. I mean, that's where you tighten your grip on the game. And we just didn't get it. And then sure enough, they made us pay on the corner.
Yeah. It was a nice shot that he took. It just it's one of those ones that you don't understand how it didn't make contact with anybody on the way in. Where surely, like, as you watch it the first time, it's like, who'd that bounce off of? And you have guesses about who. No, it didn't hit anybody. It just went straight through and in. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting set piece too, because Eze is there by himself on the top of the box. The ball's floated into him. That's obviously, I don't want to say a set play per se, but it kind of is, right? The ball is sent up to him for him to trap and settle and score. He doesn't quite do that. He gets off a nice volley. It's a nice shot. I mean, credit to him. And you can see Raya, of course, he's screened. He doesn't see the ball at all until it's far too late. It's a it's a good finish. Yeah, in baseball they call it a seeing eye single, right? It just seems to it just has that exact spot where it needs to go to get through and get where it needs to go. And there's a little bit of sloppiness there too, right? And
a lot, yeah.
Palace is a team with some dangerous players on them. Mark Guehi is a name that is all over the place for transfer to one of the bigger clubs last summer. Eze is a name. We'll talk about Mateta as well. I mean, there's some players with some quality and some possible danger on Palace, and we just again we switched off at the wrong moment, and they made us pay 1-1. But then it's okay because we got it back.
Yeah. Just in time to close out the first half. Trossard, though, that was a nice run of play. Good assist from Timber on that one. It was a little sloppy the way that Trossard, he didn't have solid footing when he took the shot. It looked like he kind of fell back on his backside as he made contact with the ball, but it worked. He got it.
Yeah, and he has some finishing ability. He's an interesting guy, as we sort of talked about, thinking about the lineup, looking ahead to Paris, especially with Partey being out and Marino potentially going back into the midfield. Does that mean there's room up top for Trossard? But we know about his quality, especially coming off the bench, especially if he's feeling it, he's arguably as good a finisher as the club has.
Yeah.
And so, you like that he's feeling good with that. I particularly, I should say, enjoyed sort of the understatedness of our celebrations, both of them, especially at Trossard's. I mean, again, the sense of what does this game mean? How important is this to Arsenal? It felt like Trossard's, it felt more like the fourth goal against Ipswich, where you just kind of, hug your teammate and, give a quick hug to your teammate and then walk back to the center field. It wasn't, for a goal that put you up right before the half. I thought that was a little, it was subdued, but you kind of understand it, right? Again, what does this game mean to the team and to the players and even to the fans? It's subdued, and that's what I saw.
Real-time follow-up. I was actually thinking of the Ipswich goal that Trossard made, where he kind of fell backwards on his bum after. This one, he was kind of staggering around. He kind of stumbled a little bit and still managed to get solid enough of a shot to get it in, but he didn't actually fall over.
It was deflected too on the way in, I believe. So,
okay.
Not enough to make a. Or I think that they watched the replay and go, it's a little deflection, kind of changes the trajectory, kind of messed with the keeper a little bit, but it was an own goal kind of trajectory, but it was just enough to kind of mess up the keeper a little bit.
Right.
And, that's why you take shots. That's why you get that finishing in. But again, I thought, I don't know. The general discourse around this game has been that we were poor. What do you think?
Like you said, we were pretty dangerous in the first half. Rice alone had a couple really good chances that just barely missed. We had some lapses even early on, like in the 7th minute. Kamada, I don't remember how they pronounced that. He got off a shot that he probably shouldn't have been allowed to take, that we let through. And Kedia, almost got one. The ball landed at his feet, in the box, I think, if I'm remembering this right. And Kivior, and Kivior did this a couple times this match, just barely got enough on it, his leg or his foot, just enough to send it wide. So there was some danger on that. It certainly wasn't our best performance, but it's probably about how we've been doing in the league the last couple months. It seems about the same to me, not any worse, really. Okay. All of our other draws, it's about the same as.
Yeah, again, that's kind of the unfortunate thing with the other draws, because we can rattle off a bunch of them. I guess I'd say it wasn't the quality we've come to expect. We've definitely had much stronger performances at various points. That's definitely true. But I do think, I thought we created enough opportunities, certainly in the first half, to put this one to bed, and we didn't. And that, as much as I'm unbothered by the result and it's a draw, kind of more just frustrated rather than angry about it, there is a part of me that's it felt in a lot of ways like the ultimate result. We'll talk about their equalizer in just a moment. but it just sort of felt like the ultimate result of it didn't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a game we absolutely had the opportunities. We could have won, should have won. And it's just, you're at that point of the season. I mean, you've sort of seen this, right? By the time we get to this stage of the season, we kind of know what the team is, right?
Yeah.
There's things we look for and say, oh, if this happens, things are going well and we feel confident. But if this goes wrong, well, all of a sudden you see certain things pop up and go, oh, that's our weakness. That's a problem. And here it feels like we're getting a little, especially because of the way the season is played out, it does feel like the league is getting those weaknesses and getting those weak moments, and such that a game that we could easily have been up 3 or 4-1, all of a sudden is only one goal and leaves you open to the kind of mistakes that we've seen now and again. In this case, I guess you'd say the second mistake in a week for William Saliba.
Yeah, so disappointing.
He's such
and
such an
good finish
player.
from Mateta. Like that was a well executed taking advantage of that situation that we opened up for him. But yeah.
I mean, coming off of the mistake in Madrid, and we talked about this. I credited the one in Madrid, or at least I thought for that one you could put some of the blame on some of his teammates for not keeping him as aware of his surroundings. I mean, obviously you are responsible for your surroundings and being aware of where you are, but that's also your teammate's job when you're being pressured, man on, let him know. And I wonder if that didn't happen the way it did. This one I think this was just, I don't know what he was doing. This one I got to put on Saliba. And, Mateta's a strong guy, and Odegaard's caught a little out of awares, but man, Odegaard got shrugged off a little too easily there. And Mateta's chip was pretty impressive. I don't know about goal. They were going on about goal of the year. I was like, all right, let's lay it on a little bit. It's impressive. It was a good chip. It was a perfectly placed ball, credit to him, but that was, okay. But yeah, I mean, you put us in a situation where those are the kinds of opportunities you're conceding. And I do worry a little bit about that, because it does, on the one hand, it feels like we've been the victim of so much of that negative variance, right? How many times do we see a team generate one decent opportunity, but they score on it? Mm-hmm. But then again, we think back, like the first, 3 games of the year, David Raya's got the double save.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, this sort of thing keeps happening. And again, we're a good defensive team. Don't misread me on this. We are a very good defensive team. But those kind of lapses, especially as we sort of seen what it takes to win the league. Yeah, sure, City wasn't there, but look at Liverpool. How many points did they drop this year? Like, if that's the standard, and we can talk about all kinds of reasons why that might be the case, and I don't want to sit here and call anybody a failure, but it's if you're looking ahead to next season, in some ways this game represents all the things that we're looking for in terms of adjustments. We didn't score the goals we needed to. We didn't convert those opportunities, and we put ourselves into a position where bad mistakes created quality chances, which were buried. And once again, we were ahead, and we dropped points from a winning position. We were ahead in the game. The other team rallied to tie, and we dropped points.
Yeah. I mean, one other word of defense, or I guess boosting up our defense too, is, we are on track at this moment to win the Golden Glove. We're still like 3 fewer goals allowed than Liverpool. So we're still leading the league with goals allowed.
Okay. So in terms of goals, the strongest defense, sure. And there, I think it's the goals scored, whereas our real issue. I mean,
right.
Liverpool has 80 goals. We have 63.
Right.
We're actually 4th in terms of goals. Both Newcastle and Manchester City have more than we do in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
and again, it's down to the strength of our defense that we're ahead of them in the table,
Yeah. By the way, we should remind, the Golden Gloves are for the keepers, and it's for the most clean sheets, which we're definitely not winning this year.
Oh, you're right. Never mind.
Yeah, that was an individual award.
Yeah. Well, the reason it got confused in my head is because it's given to the individual, but I still consider a clean sheet. Not people do assign that to the keeper, but to me, that is still the whole defense that contributes to a clean sheet. But anyways,
of course, right? Yeah. I mean, well, again, not every result is the same. Sometimes, sometimes a 1-0 is a comprehensive beatdown, and it doesn't really matter. You know what? But sometimes sometimes the results don't necessarily reflect, the score isn't totally reflective of the results. I actually just looked this up. I did, by the way, say, oh, we're not going to win that. Raya is actually second in the league in clean sheets. He has 12 behind Nottingham Forest. Matt Sells was 13. So that is not that's not at all out of the question, actually.
Right, we have 4 games left, I think.
We have 4 games left. Now, granted, Newcastle and Liverpool are among them. I don't know who Forest has left this year, but, certainly they've been... Forest is running out of gas a little bit. They've been struggling over the last couple of weeks. So something interesting to keep an eye on in terms of the end of the season individually. So,
yeah. So you had wanted to say something about our squad rotation and how that contributed to our performance against Crystal Palace. Would you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's not so much... I mean, there are some things that are kind of obvious looking at it. I mean, the biggest one we know, of course, Partey is going to be out for the first leg against PSG. So this was a perfect opportunity for him to play 90 minutes and not run somebody else out for 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. So he played. I think you also see it a lot with when Raheem Sterling starts. There's really nothing else to say about that. I think
he had a couple moments that were, I guess, on par with what he usually does, where he's given a really good chance and something goes wrong. I think in this match, I didn't directly say he messed it up so much. It was just kind of like, okay, well, that looked like it could have been something and it didn't work out, and it didn't look to me like it was necessarily his fault specifically. Solely.
Yeah, he was kind of there tonight. Yeah. Or I say tonight in the game,
right?
Yeah, Again, Sterling is there to soak up minutes. In that sense, he's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's playing so someone else doesn't have to. Mm-hmm. The big one that was a little concerning to me is both Ben White and Mikel Merino were not on the bench for this one. And there's... Arteta was being a little coy about them. Let's see if I can... Is there anything I found here? It said they had picked up some issues in the Ipswich game, and Arteta said they couldn't be involved. If not, they would have been. His comment asked about being fit to play PSG, he said, we'll have to wait and see. They weren't able to be in the squad today.
That's not great.
I don't know what that means. I mean, again, we are, especially at the point of the season where there's a lot of gamesmanship in there. And Arteta's always been like this. He's not really going to say until he has to. But knowing that we're going in already being without Partey, and of course the other injured players, I mean, Trossard we are going to have to get a lot of run out of Trossard, potentially. So getting him up there, getting him feeling confident, sort of seeing some of that. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of Jakob Kiwior this week. Ideally, you would have sat Saliba more, but with Tomiyasu being hurt all season and Kiwior already having to play for Gabriel and Ben White being hurt, Saliba's got to keep playing. So I do wonder if perhaps there's a little bit of mental exhaustion with him. We talked about his errors, how much of that is maybe a little bit of that. But you sort of see that as well, right? Rice played a portion of the game. Saka came off the bench. Ethan Nwaneri, I think he's still dealing with a little something injury-wise, because ideally he would be playing a little bit more, and we just really haven't seen that as much. So I did think it was impressive. Again, the shocking things, Lewis Skelly started the game and then got pulled off on a relatively planned substitution, right? Again, speaks a lot of where he is and where he's come.
Yeah.
Another 90 minutes from Timber, who's, I think probably has a claim for being the most underrated player on the club this year, given his comeback from injury. We'll save the year-end retrospectives for about a month from now when we're in May.
Stay tuned.
But it's an interesting thing to think about, because we talk about how this game didn't matter, and look, but every player who could play, who mattered, was on the field at some point or another. Mm-hmm. Having a week between games helps a lot with that, but it is kind of interesting to sort of see how they're thinking about these games and how Arteta wants to use his lineup and who he deems necessary to sit for some time, And how much of that is driven not so much by desire, but simply by injury. I mean, Saka sat for most of the game, and I think that's mostly because he's still not 100% from his injury, ignoring the fact we don't want anything to happen to him.
Right. Yeah. So all that in mind, who is your player of the week?
We just had the one game this week. I'm going to go with Jakub Kiwior. I thought... I mean, overall, I said we weren't as bad as I expected. I didn't see a lot of some outstanding performances. There were sloppy plays in the second half in particular. We got very sloppy, including some from players who should know better. But I think with Kiwior, he sort of continues to establish himself as a solid central defender. He's gotten the run of games. He's getting more comfortable. He made a few good tackles and a few good blocks at key moments as well. So, and obviously the goal, that's a fun thing about this, right? Is that I thought he played well overall. And the goal kind of is a cherry on top of the performance as opposed to defining how his game went. But, good for him creating the goal. Obviously that's more important than a player of the match honor. But I still feel pretty confident with Kiwior. I feel much more confident with Kiwior going up against Paris than I did when we were thinking he was it for Madrid. So,
yeah,
good job for Kiwior for getting settled in.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there. Yeah, it was, the early goal, definitely got him kind of front of mind throughout the match early on. But no, I noted the same thing that you did. He had a few key blocks, I wouldn't even necessarily call them tackles. It was just getting just enough in there to deflect the ball just enough that they didn't score. And that happened at least 3 times that I noticed. It was really, really essential. And yeah, he definitely seems like he's coming into his own in the absence of Gabriel and getting all those minutes that he's been getting. So yeah, no, really great there. As my tradition is, I would like to pick somebody different since you sniped me on that one. So I am going to give a shout to Miles Lewis-Skelly. Overall, a good performance from him, like we've grown accustomed to. He's really solid. The one moment in particular that really got me thinking about him as a potential contender would be at the very beginning of the second half when there was a yellow card given to Devaney, I guess a Scottish player for Crystal Palace. Foul on Miles Lewis-Skelly that he orchestrated. You can definitely see in the replays that he played him like a fiddle on that one, knew that the foul was going to happen, reacted right to draw the yellow card from the ref. And I thought that was some really clever use of a dark arts that we've been lacking a little bit with Ben White not playing as much this season. So a little bit of a return to that. And I would pick him second to Kiwior. So.
Yeah, Miles Lewis-Skelly does have a little bit of that subtle edge to him, which you need guys like that. You hate playing against them. He'd be a very easy player to dislike if he was on another team, but he's on ours, so he's fantastic.
Right.
But you can see, yeah, he's a clever player. And again, it is kind of shocking that the way he's just sort of, and again, injuries are part of this, but it's kind of solidified himself as he's the left back.
Yeah.
But there's even if Calafiori was healthy, he'd be starting. He's starting. He's going to start against Paris on Tuesday. When Tuesday?
Yeah.
Wednesday, Tuesday. Yeah, he's going to start on Tuesday. That's just how it's going to be. And just again, we were talking a lot about Ethan Nwaneri a lot coming into the season. He was a name to sort of watch, and injuries are a part of this. I don't mean to say he's been totally eclipsed, but Miles Lewis-Skelly has just been an impressive rise in terms of putting himself in this position.
Yeah, no, it's been good watching him develop, and hopefully we continue to over the coming years. So, yeah. But all right, so as we are drawing near the end of the season, let's reflect on the current state of the table a little bit and talk about what we have coming up, how other teams are doing. Like we noted that there was one locked in relegation last week. I mean, as I look at the table now, it seems like the other couple clubs that are in the bottom 3 don't really look like there's any plausible way out for them either. How are things looking from top to bottom on the table?
Right, so let's start at the bottom. Leicester City and Southampton have both sealed their relegation. I'm trying to do some math in my head. I don't believe Ipswich Town is officially relegated. 4 games left? 16?
I think they are, because they have 4 games left to play. That would get them, in the best case, 12 points, and they'd still have 33 to West Ham's 36. So I think they have clinched relegation.
That must have been this weekend. So yes, Ipswich are going down, 3 up, 3 down. The same group that came up is all going back down this season. I didn't realize how awful West Ham's season was. I knew they weren't good. Jeez.
Tottenham, too. Tottenham's only 1 point ahead of them now.
First off, take a look at that clump of teams there, 14 to 17. Manchester United, Everton, Tottenham, and West Ham. I mean, those are some Premier League mainstays, including, obviously United with their history. But, I mean, Everton, I remember back in the days when it was the Big Four, and Everton was the number 4. I mean, they were near the top of the league. Spurs have had some good, obviously are the alleged Big Six in terms of money. West Ham has been a pretty solid mid-table, or they won a European trophy a couple of years ago with Declan Rice. So yeah, to see all those teams down there is somewhat shocking. Looking up, then you get to Wolves. They're at 41. Palace is there at 45. I think they finished 12th, 3 years in a row or something. It's kind of incredible.
Interesting footnote.
Then we get to Brentford. And then from there you start getting Fulham, Brighton, Bournemouth. Fulham 51, Brighton 51, Bournemouth 50. That group cluster right in there. And just 6 points ahead of them is Aston Villa at 57. You start to get the black cluster there. That's the bottom tier of the European spots. And we talked about this a little bit last week about the number of, where you are in the table and how that might affect things. Bear in mind, Crystal Palace, if they win the FA Cup, they go to the Europa League. They take one of those spots. But if Chelsea wins the Europa Conference League, they also get a Europa League spot, although they're currently sitting in 5th. They're currently level on points, ahead on goal difference with Nottingham Forest. We talk about Forest being in a Champions League spot. They're now down in 6th. Yeah. And they've got 2 losses in their last 5, which is more than anyone else around them has. City's at 61, Newcastle's at 62. There's a big clump of teams right in there. That's a 5-point gap between Newcastle in 3rd and Villa in 7th.
Right.
That's a big chunk of teams, and that's a lot of ways that can go pear-shaped for any one of those sides if they hit a bad run of form at the wrong time. And if they had hit a bad run of form now, because we've only got 4 games left, then you've got us at 67. We are 5 points ahead of Newcastle. With 4 to play, I feel pretty good about where we are. We've talked about this, but at the same time, we have 3 draws in our last 4 games. We have another game sitting between between the PSG legs. That's away to Bournemouth this weekend. I would like another couple of wins, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
And having said all of that, if you look at the 4 teams we have left, obviously we have Bournemouth. That could be interesting. Bournemouth is, as we said, in potential competition for a European spot. So keep your eye. They're not an easy team. They're not an easy team to play against. After that is Liverpool. I'm sorry. Away to Liverpool. Which, who knows? They might be hungover still from celebrating the trophy. That could be a really good, interesting game for us following the semifinals, however they go, to really sort of set down a marker and sort of say, oh, by the way, I know we're behind you and I know you won the title. That's cool, but we're not going anywhere.
Right.
Ultimately, it could be a good motivation for them to pop out, especially at Anfield, to say, no. Remember how you thought you might have a chance? No, just so we're clear, we are the best team. So there could be some interesting motivation playing into that, especially if PSG goes particularly well for us, and all of a sudden, does it really matter what we get the result at Anfield? Does it really matter? I don't know. Then we have Newcastle, again, a team that's been a bit of a boogeyman for us, and one that's also deep in competition for a Champions League spot next year. So there are some tricky games coming up as well, and we're going to need perhaps a little bit better performances before we close the season against Southampton, who is not going to be the worst team in Premier League history. Well,
right.
Probably not. So currently the worst team in Premier League history was 2007-08 Derby County, who had a record of 1 win, 8 draws, and 29 losses for 11 points.
Okay. So they would have to lose every match from here on out to tie that number of points.
To tie the number of points, but they do have 2 wins, so they are ahead of the Rams on that count. They're currently minus 55 on goal difference. Derby finished the season minus 69 on goal difference.
Right.
24 points behind 19th place Birmingham City.
Yeah. They
were officially relegated on March 29th. Yeah, they were. I don't feel good saying this. Again, one of my good friends from graduate school is from Derby. He's a big Derby fan, and I feel bad saying this. They were so out of their depth that season. They were, wow. Yeah, they were awful that year. Yeah. So Southampton won't be that bad, but the fact we're even having that conversation is not a good sign. Yeah. Just some news and notes. We talked about this a little bit. Is now, I believe it's official now that Burnley and Leeds will be back up next year from Championship. We're heading towards the playoffs in that league as well. And then moving into the Championship, this is the big story floating around earlier this weekend. Hollywood FC, Wrexham, the boys from Wrexham are going to be in the Championship next year.
Wow!
It had 3 consecutive promotions, which is a pretty incredible feat.
Meteoric, yeah.
Yeah. However, they are the biggest step up. I remember hearing this a couple of years ago. What was the step up from like the 5th to the 4th team? Yeah, they're in pretty good shape to get promoted again. The step from League One to Championship is big,
right?
Especially for a team whose stadium is like half the size of some of the ones they're going to be going up against. I mean, you look through the Championship, the list of teams in the Championship. Just about all of them have been in the Premier League in the last 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a group of teams that, you know, from an Arsenal perspective, they don't come off as being very big size, but for Wrexham, some of them are substantially bigger than Wrexham.
Sure.
This will be a much stiffer task. It is impressive to get promoted out of League One on the first go. That was really impressive, but you know, this is going to be a much bigger step for them. And as like Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester are finding out, the gap between the Championship and the Premier League kind of continues to grow. There's right. An interesting thing there to sort of see going forward what that looks like. So
yeah.
A lot of that end of the season stuff is coming up. It's going to be May next time. Next time we talk, it'll be May, which is wild.
You know, before we leave the table, one funny thing that I noted is when you go to the Premier League site's table page, it's kind of cool. You can view the details, and it shows like a full timeline of all the wins and losses and how each team moves up and down the table. And just looking at Liverpool's, it's funny. They gained their spot at the top of the table in the 6th match week on a 1-2 win against Wolves. The only time they dropped back down to 2nd was when we drew against them in October. So we pulled them down to 2nd momentarily before they went back up and stayed there.
As I recall, that was another game we dropped points from a winning position while playing with a pretty makeshift defense. Again, you know, we can point to that result doesn't give us the title, but yeah, we if the season ends with a win in Munich, again speaking in broad terms, but if the season ends with a win in Munich, we're not really going to care how the league went,
right?
But I don't want to just completely dismiss the league altogether. There should be some frustration left over coming into next season that this should have been better. Maybe Liverpool does win the title in the end. Maybe we just simply don't have enough firepower. The injury, you know, we've talked about managing those expectations, right? How much of this should we be excited? Say, oh my God, look at the injuries we dealt with. Look at some of the bizarre red card situations we faced, and somehow we still finished in 2nd. Versus maybe don't draw 13 times. Maybe don't drop points from a winning position, you know, however many times we did it, and maybe not finish in 2nd again. You know, that's kind of, it's both of those things. And it's funny that our perspective on that is going to be determined entirely by a completely different competition, totally, not even in England.
Yeah. So one question that I've had on my mind, I think I may have even mentioned it in passing in a couple previous episodes, but when someone's injured, like Saka specifically recently, and they talked about when he came back and that he did well in the Real Madrid match, and they were talking about how the physios, when working with him the entire time, were just focused on returning back to be able to play in the quarterfinals in the Champions League. That was what they were talking about over and over and over again. And you hear this term on the announcing, the commentating while you're watching these matches, and they always talk about the physios. What exactly is a physio? I mean, obviously, I know roughly it's part of the medical staff. It has something to do with physiology. I don't know if they are physiologists, if that is such, I've never heard of such a title, if that is like what their role is, but like what exactly makes someone a physio? Like what are they?
I've kind of always seen it as the Britishism for like what we would say in American sports, the trainer or the medical staff.
Okay.
Like when a player is hurt, and you see this in any sport, right? A player gets hurt and somebody comes out of the sideline or the locker or the dugout or whatever it is and is there with a towel with some, checking them, moving them, that's what I've always, this physio to me has always sort of been just the catch-all term for the guy who comes out and checks the players when they're hurt. I don't know if it stands for something else. I don't know if it's just sort of a catch-all term for whoever comes out to perform that kind of medical assistance. That to be honest, I don't know that the complete. I don't know if there's like a deeper meaning behind it, or if there's like, these are the physios, but this is the trainer. I don't know if that there's.
I get the feeling. So I'm Googling it a little bit now, and by the way, I don't actually use Google anymore. I use a paid search engine called Kagi, which is pretty good, and I've been happy with. Anybody who wants to find out more, talk to me on Twitter, and I can tell you about it. But so. It looks like this might just be like a regional thing where like we call it trainer, they call it physio. And specifically, one of the pages that came up in my search results was the Wikipedia page for physical therapy. And apparently physical therapy is also known as physiotherapy. Yeah. So that's probably what it is physical therapists, which would make sense. Like there's a lot of overlap between physical therapy and sports medicine, Mm-hmm. So that's probably the origin. Yeah.
That seems to make sense. I'm sure there is a little bit to it, but I think it more falls under the category of it's just like, why is it called a pitch? I don't know, because it is.
Yep, there's always that. One other kind of fun thing. So we talked last week about how I had seen Bob Marley One Love, and soccer had a bigger impact on Bob Marley's life than I realized. It's kind of funny, like. So a couple things that I like a lot intertwined, and I watched the movie Better Man about Robbie Williams. So we've talked before about my fascination and love of British pop music, and Robbie Williams was actually one of the earliest artists from British pop music that aside from the Beatles, but like modern day British pop music that I really, really loved. And I've listened to all or most of his albums. And, I noticed like on one of his album covers, it features like him and like a fake soccer jersey being hoisted up by a bunch of clones of himself, like having won some trophy or something on the soccer pitch. And I could tell soccer was something that he really liked a lot, that he cared about. And, that movie starts off with him as a kid playing soccer, and there not too long after there is a key moment in the early part of the movie where a character is leaving on the bus to see the FA Cup final and to see Manchester United because he's from Stoke, which also I heard that he's from Stoke and I immediately thought set pieces, corner kicks.
Yep.
But I take it Stoke is in the greater Manchester area, it seems like, because they were going to see Manchester United in the FA Cup. Yeah,
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Robbie Williams is one of those interesting ones where like he is massive in England and is just like a complete non-entity in the United States. Like Americans,
not complete. Like in the late '90s when I first started liking him, like he had some hit singles and some music videos that were popular. But right, he's faded into obscurity here, where I think he had more staying power there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but like if you're asking me about like names of British, bands or artists that are big in the United States, I mean, thinking more modern, I mean, the Spice Girls or Oasis.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the ones that like Americans are, lots of Americans have heard of. Their songs still play on the radio, and I don't get that. Robbie Williams doesn't have the same kind of salience.
Yeah,
which has nothing to do with his quality, by the way. I'm
right. Yeah, no, and actually, it's funny you mention Oasis because, Liam and Noel Gallagher are represented at one point in the movie. It seems like they were friends at least a little bit once he had his comeback as a solo artist. And let me just point out, if anyone is thinking, oh, I remember Robbie Williams, I want to watch that movie, let me tell you one big thing you need to know about this movie. Robbie Williams throughout, from the first shot where he's in his keeper jersey playing soccer with his mates, through the end of the movie, he is a CGI ape the entire time. So it is never remarked upon. It is just kind of a fact of this movie. He is not literally an ape in universe. I think he is just a regular person. It's just kind of him thinking of himself as a performing monkey. And he was actually he provided voice talent as a voiceover narrator throughout the movie, and then also actually singing the vocals and all the songs and stuff, which it worked in a really odd way. I really didn't think that, I'd seen it on the cover and I thought that it was just a clever marketing image, but I didn't expect them to stick with it the entire time. And I almost acclimated by the end. But it's interesting because it is jarring. When you watch the Bob Marley movie and it's Bob Marley's voice the whole time when he's singing, right? And the transition from who you know as an actor playing him to the actual voice is kind of weird. And so they're able to walk that balance much better when it's nobody's face who you're seeing on him. It is a monkey. So in an odd way, it helped with that at least. But what is up for next week?
Right. So just in case you didn't realize it, on Tuesday, Arsenal's playing in the Champions League. First leg of the semifinal, home against Paris Saint-Germain. That will be on CBS. That's right. Over-the-air network television here in America. Also on Paramount Plus for those of you who are... I
was going to ask, because I know sometimes when things are over the air, they get blocked in the streaming apps, but Paramount Plus also, that's good to know.
Yeah, so that's how that will go. That'll be on Tuesday, Champions League, the home leg. And then on Saturday, yes, the Premier League, away to Bournemouth. That will be, speaking of over-the-air network television, NBC. That's right. 2 network TV games this week for Arsenal. So come and tune in, America.
And as a reminder, when it's on NBC, it is also on Peacock. It's when it's on the cable networks, the paid channels. That's when you can't watch it on Peacock. But when it's on over-the-air NBC, you can watch it in Peacock too. So
sure,
live instead of delayed by a day. Yeah,
I believe you.
Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to not just smash, but obliterate the like button on any or perhaps all of our videos this week. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Arsenal in the Champions League. Let's go, Gunners!